You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama's syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. Man, we got the local, the state, the national covered down on all of the issues. And oh yeah, like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to Thursday. It's the day right before Friday. We like it because we're going to get ourselves to the weekend as quick as we possibly can. And Thursday is just a speed bump in the way. But yeah, we got a great show laid out for you, and ably pushing the buttons on the board today, as always, JP. Hey, buddy.
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
It's good to see the sun the last couple of days.
You know, I hadn't thought about that. We haven't seen the sun since last Saturday or something.
If the sun was still even there.
It's still there. We don't live in Seattle. It's actually here. Yeah, you doing good?
Yeah, I'm doing good.
Great show laid on for today. Hey, listen, we got a full lineup for you today. So stand by for this. So at 3 o'clock today, I've got a guy calling in from D.C. named Brad Viator. And Brad Viator is an expert in energy policy, and he works with energy companies trying to help them, sort of work their way through the regulatory environment. And he can give us firsthand what it's been like under the Biden administration and where he thinks we're headed under the Trump administration, because we're going to be talking about energy policy with Brad Viator calling in at 3 o'clock. And then 3:30, you know the deal. It's Thursday. So yeah, at 3:30, we break from the routines. We get off the dippers for a minute, and we go to an episode of Butters and Lee. So Butters and Lee today at 3:30. And then, oh, by the way, at 4 o'clock, I've got another guest coming in, Erica Thomas, who's been on the show many times. She's one of the folks who works at 1819 News, does an amazing job. She just broke a story that is maddening, and I'll talk about it more in a minute. But this story is another one of those library stories, and the graphic nature of what's on 1819 News right now is so much that they had to actually sort of mask some of the pictures. That's how bad it is. In the kids section of the public library down at Fairhope. We'll talk to Erica Thomas from 1819 News at 4 o'clock. And there's still a triple dipper, so hit it, man.
The Triple Dipper. 3 stories you've got to know.
That's right, the Triple Dipper, 3 stories, 3 themes, if you will, that you got to know as we run today's show. First off, out of the gate, we're going to talk about off the grid. How's our grid doing? Is our grid sustainable? What is our energy policy? What are our energy sources? Are we going to have a change in policy? I would say yes. But the bottom line is this. We're going to talk about America's grid. And I want to talk about that with somebody who knows a little something about it. That's that guy, Brad Viator, calling in at 3 o'clock. So off the grid, number 1, Triple Dipper. Number 2, the library wars. When did libraries become so just desperately controversial? When did they become so amazingly just like gross and kind of out there? And not in every respect, but certainly the left's efforts to reach our kids. We're going to talk about the library wars and the latest revelations in conjunction with that conversation with Erica Thomas and the story that's up on 1819news.com right now. And then number 3, are you tracking the stuff about drones? I mean, it's up on the screens right now in the studio. Drones. Listen, what is happening? So number 3 on the Triple Dipper is called Droning On. What are we seeing? What is it real? Is it a foreign entity? Should we be concerned? Droning On, that's number 3 on the Triple Dipper. All right, well, let me jump on in here to the opening monologue, the Right Side Way monologue. As always, I'll remind you that the Right Side Way monologue is brought to you every day by attorney Stan McDonald. He's a partner at the law firm of Wilmer and Lee in Huntsville. Stan McDonald, sponsor of the Right Side Way monologue, and I'll tell you more about him in a few minutes. Well, so earlier this year, I spent an entire show talking about the progressive agenda at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center's Space Camp. Remember that? And I'm a fan of Space Camp, a big fan. My daughter went there. I mean, I think it's one of the coolest things going. But when Space Camp became an alternative lifestyle camp with activists pursuing a chance to flaunt their progressive values in the faces of kids without parental consent, well, that was a problem. And then there's the public library system. I mean, who would have ever thought that a public library would be the epicenter of culture wars? I mean, the library was always that quiet mild-mannered place where it was safe to drop off your kids, let them get a book about Tom Sawyer or study for the paper they have to write for school. But more and more, we're finding out that public libraries, just like every other bastion of goodness and rightness, has become a place that activists try to worm their way into. For the past couple of years, here on Rightside, we've been talking and telling you in detail about the fact that Alabama's libraries have been caught red-handed, putting books on sex and alternative lifestyles into the children's sections of the libraries, setting up gay pride displays, drag queen story hours for small, impressionable minds, and allowing graphic novels that depict sex acts and transgenderism in the same shelves with classic works in civics and history in the kids section. I mean, there's no good excuse for this. I mean, there's an excuse, but there's no good excuse. The only reason that these books exist is to get progressive left agendas into the hands of kids and hope the parents don't notice. That's it. So the Alabama Library Board passed regulations that ensures that parents know, or at least can have a say in what their kids have access to. Keep in mind the parents pay taxes. The library is a public entity paid for with parents' tax dollars. And for some parents who can't afford the internet or computers or even books, the libraries, they represent something that they can't otherwise provide to their kids. So the state library board mandated that kids must have parental consent typically to obtain a library card, and the parents will have a say in what they can access. Like Huntsville. Huntsville's putting a tiered parental authority in place for kids so that parents can grant some access and limit others. But libraries are also charged with governing more strictly what kids can access in general. And then Fairhope and Spanish Fort went out there and put a book on their shelves. In the teen section, no less. A book that is a graphic, and I mean graphic, a graphic step-by-step instruction guide with illustrations on how to have sex, how to get into kink and fetish lifestyles, how to be a transgender, how to recognize what your parents don't want you to do might not always be the right decision for you because you really want to do it. I mean, who thought this was a good idea? Who looked at this book and said, you know, I'm the book shopper for the library, and hey, here's a great book for kids. Let's put it on our shelves. I mean, somebody please answer the question for me. What knucklehead loaded this book into the Dewey Decimal System and thought, well, this is a special one. I'll categorize it as nonfiction for children. 1819 News, yes, they ran a story today. It came out this morning, and they pointed out that a watchdog website called booklooks.org rates the book I'm talking about a 4 out of 5 for obscene sexual illustrations and commentary, obscene sexual nudity, profanity, and alternate gender ideologies. And they have it in the teen section. Because that just made really good sense to somebody who places books on the shelves at the Fairhope and Spanish Fort libraries. And look, it brought to mind that we have to care about those who teach our kids and what they teach them, and what we know about who provides influential materials to our kids, who is in a position right now to access our kids. And parents, I'm telling you, we have to be vigilant because the left desperately wants our kids and they will stop at nothing to get to them. So Alabama recently passed a major school choice bill, right? More so than ever before, parents are going to be given a say in the educational directions of their kids. Nationwide, there's a focus on an emphasis, if you will, on asserting that in America, we value our children, and as such, we want what is best for them in every way, which included wanting the best for them in education and libraries and even space camp. As conservatives, we want to know that our children are being taught the best possible levels of reading, writing, arithmetic, sciences, technology, history, civics. In essence, we want an actual education. We want our kids to be safe, to feel valued, to have positive social interactions, to be truly educated and not indoctrinated. We want to know that as parents, we can teach values and faith and patriotism and not have some activist librarian or alternative lifestyle teacher determine that our children are their blank canvas to do anything they want with. We want our kids to have a real outcome-based education that rewards success, remediates failure, but stays focused on what is actually best for the child. Sound reasonable? Right? Conservatives want our children to be educated. Liberal progressives, they just want our children. So liberals teach kids to keep secrets from their parents, which is not just a red flag, it's grounds for a fight. I mean, too often we're hearing of groups given access to kids that teach young innocents to literally conspire with their teachers or other adults to say or do things that parents would not like and then not tell the parents. Any teacher who tried to foist that kind of dogma or play that kind of game with kids in the past would have been looking for work the very next day. But the stories keep coming in. We keep seeing them, and they are happening every day, every single day. We are catching more glimpse into the activist factories that some schools and libraries have become, where every value, every belief, every patriotic vibe and faith-based position is somehow laid bare and vacated by activists who pose as well-meaning, enlightened adults who believe that children can't tie their own shoes or count the coins in a piggy bank ought to be brought into the activist adults' world of bad decisions and bad choices and bad ideas. It happens every day now, and we're beginning to see it more and more. And I will pause right here and say that I know and I believe that the vast majority of educators and librarians, they are not at all on board with the kind of indoctrination I just described. They're not. I know that. They're patriots. There's godly influences in classrooms and libraries all over the nation. And they have a calling to truly love and educate kids. But too many of them are aware of what happens in the classroom right next to theirs or gets put on the shelves in the kids section at the library where they work, but they don't want to get involved. They don't want to face the shouts and the aspersions, and they're afraid of being called racist or homophobic or bigoted. And so too many good teachers and librarians who would never do those things themselves, they still just remain silent in the face of all the foolishness being perpetrated by their coworkers. We as Americans need to know that the good folks who work in our schools and stock the shelves at our library, they're not going to sit idly by and say nothing in the face of all this woke indoctrination. I'm telling you right now, parents will rally behind a good teacher or librarian, someone who is willing to take back their profession from the crazies who are trying to co-opt it. And I guarantee you, if a teacher sees a neighboring classroom being set up as a safe space for kids to change their names or their pronouns or allegedly their genders, or if the librarian decides to speak out when she sees a sex book being put into little Johnny's hands, and they call it out, they will have parents and concerned citizens rallying to get their back. But now that I've said that, y'all, all you Rightside ruffians, we got to keep up our end of the bargain. Because gone are the days we can just turn a blind eye. Gone are the days where we can just shrug our shoulders and go, well, it's not my kid, so it's not my fight. Progressive liberals want our kids, and if it's not your kid today, it'll be your grandchild tomorrow. So if a good teacher or a librarian, somebody who values children and truly values education, if one of those good ones takes a stand for one of those kids, it's our mission to get their back. You see it, you say it, and we get each other's back, and we never, ever settle for letting progressives indoctrinate our kids. So find the good teachers, the good librarians, and thank them. And stand with the ones who say no to the bullies. And make sure they know they're appreciated. And the bottom line is, let's guard the minds of our kids. And that's a wrap for the Rightside Way. Yeah, it's a maddening situation. I mean, listen, if you haven't seen this article, I encourage you to go look at it. I'll be talking about it in more detail later with the lady who wrote the article. But the book has no place in a kids section, and that's where it is. And right now, the locals, they got nothing to say. They're like, well, we don't understand the problem. Well, we're just following the First Amendment. Stop it. You know what you're doing. You're trying to bring the adult world and the kids' world, and you're doing it in a gross way. It's smut. That's what it is. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Just dropping truth bombs up in here. That's what we're doing. All right, so text lines are open, and a bunch of y'all already figured that out. 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Text it or call it. Same number for both. Hey, before we go any further, I got to remind you guys, so the sponsor of the daily Rightside Way monologue that you just heard for the break is attorney Stan McDonald. He's a partner at the law firm of Wilmer and Lee in Huntsville. A 30-year veteran in the practice of law in North Alabama, not only will Stan advocate and fight for your legal needs, but he's an absolute warrior on the things that you Rightside ruffians care about. He has been for years. Attorney Stan McDonald, by the way, has represented his clients in literally thousands of real estate transactions. He knows how to represent you in court, in the federal, state, and local, in front of the bench and all those venues. When Stan McDonald's on your side, you'll have no greater friend. Your adversaries will have no greater foe. So here's the bottom line. Attorney Stan McDonald, partner at the law firm of Wilmer and Lee. He's an America First family man. He's an attorney who's vigilant for those he represents. And here's how you contact him. You ready? Stan McDonald. Here's his number, 256-479-3020. That's 256-479-3020. Stan McDonald. Tell him you heard about it on Rightside. And I got to do the thing. No representation made. The quality legal service before was greater than the quality legal service before other lawyers.
I like the deep breath in before you do it. Yeah.
I have to. Got to get all the air in there so I can get the air right back out. All right. Hey, listen, a bunch of text messages. Let me grab a few of these texts right quick. You guys are awesome. John from Huntsville texting in. He says, Phil, fantastic monologue. Also, that's the way it goes. Phil, fantastic monologue. Also, JP, did you hear that Bill Belichick is now the head coach at North Carolina?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It is crazy.
I thought that was just going to be a rumor, but nope, it's official. Like he was there doing a press conference earlier today.
Yeah, it's just
nuts.
It just
doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Of course, his girlfriend's probably still a student there. I had to say something, didn't I? Danny from Decatur says, did you see the story from last month about the two Chinese nationals that were detained and arrested for flying a modified drone around Vandenberg? I did, and I think it's one of my stories for today in that stack of stuff for that dipper. Thanks, Danny. Red from Tony, Alabama says, they need to charge anyone in the process of putting a book with pictures like that with an attempt to supply a minor with pornography. I bet they clear the shelves real quick. You know what? You would think so. And you'd also have to look at this and go, who told you this was a good idea? And oh, by the way, who's the book buyer for the library? Or did somebody send it to you for free and you just went, oh, look, a free book. Don't even bother looking at it. Let's put it on the shelves. I mean, how does this work?
Well, I was wondering that too, of like, how is this legal? Like for them, like how are these people not in jail for putting porn in front of a kid? But then also, can the parents of any kid who comes across this, or will they be able to sue on the grounds of, you're putting something in front of my kids that, like, I feel like there's something should, like, either be somebody being sued, somebody being arrested, something. Yeah. Like, this just can't, I don't get how this can just happen.
I don't either. And you know what? Here's the thing. If it was on the shelves because somebody walked in the door with it under their shirt, and they walked up there and slipped it on the shelves and put it up there and thought, whoop, whoop, got a little thing. Then but this one I think this one actually had the Dewey Decimal System marker on the side bar, on the side, the ridge, the spine of the book. So that would mean that they not only took it in, they processed it in and put it in the system, knowing full well what it was.
Yeah.
Jeff from Indiana says, hey, Phil, I want to know who's in charge of hiring all these degenerates, especially apparently the hiring pool for libraries must be a kiddie pool full of Fruit Loops. Listen, there's some good ones out there, but man, there's some chuckleheads too. John from Harvestville, love the monologue. You know what? I got to come back to that one because it was too long. Anyway, I will come right back after this break. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned.
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right.
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. Man, covering down on some major ground across the northern half of the most beautiful state in the nation. This one, I'm talking about this one. Y'all, the one I'm in, it's Alabama. This show goes like way down south of Birmingham and up north of Huntsville, Tuscaloosa, back to Gadsden, parts of Georgia, Tennessee, and even Mississippi, all thrown in just for good measure. Speaking of which, there's going to be a little bit of difference in the lay of the land for our broadcast signal for the live radio show. It won't change a thing for those of y'all in Huntsville. It won't change a thing for y'all basically covering most of the northern part of our territory. But on January 1st, we are going to be coming off of 101.1 FM out of Birmingham. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, contract negotiations, the term was up, and the negotiations concluded that we would decide we'll go separate ways. So as much as I hate it in terms of our audience there, it was the best business decision we had to make. But let me just say this. If you listen to us on 101.1 live every day, just know this. You're not going to lose us because you can get us online. There's a ton of people that actually stream the show live online every day. Plus our station affiliates elsewhere in the state, you'll still be able to get those. Plus we may have some announcements coming in the near future, but I'll hold that for then. In the meantime, if you want to watch or listen to the show, because I said watch, I mean, we're streaming right now. It's video. My smiling face is on the screen right now. If you want to watch or listen to the show at any given time, anywhere in the whole wide world, go to the World Wide Web. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitch. You can find us on Rumble. You can find us in 2 different places on X or Twitter. Go to my personal account at @SinPhilWilliams or go to Rightside_media. We're streaming live right now. You can also go to our website, rightsidemedia.org. What I'm saying is a ton of y'all already watch online, and more of y'all still can. Go check it out today. And if you go to one of those platforms, do me the favor of this. Hit subscribe or follow, whatever the case may be in that particular platform. It means the world to us as a business when y'all do that because we have to hit certain markers on those platforms to be allowed to do even more. Anyway, there's a whole shameless plug.
And who knows, hopefully one day we'll be back in 101 FM's. Everybody who's listening there, hopefully we'll be back in that neck of the woods.
I already anticipate.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
But I'll stop there. Hey, listen, we're going to start this next topic, but I got to read a couple more texts first. John from Harvest, I started to read it before the break. John from Harvest says, Phil, love the monologue. I was a Boy Scout leader for over 20 years. He said every leader was required to take the youth protection training on a regular basis. This whole progressive agenda regarding our kids violates multiple points of youth protection and raises so many red flags, one has to wonder if the harm against kids is intentional. Exposing this garbage is one way to protect kids, so keep up the good work. John from Harvest. John, thank you. By the way, thank you for what you've done over the years, mentoring kids through the Scouts. And you're right. Listen, it is intentional. There's no way that book got on the shelf. It was intentional when the authors put it together. By the way, they're from Oregon. I read that.
Figures.
Yeah. Anyway, it was intentional when they drafted the book. What the intent was, you can't deny it. It was intentional when it made its way to the library, and I don't know how, but it did. And it was intentional when it was logged in, put in the Dewey Decimal System, and put on the shelf. So, yes, intentionality is absolutely there. I'll get 1 or 2 more. Stephen from Athens says, big driver of all this nonsense, but he gives me a YouTube link, and I can't go to it right now.
The video is, remember that video a couple of years ago at the Pride Parade in New York City where they were saying they're coming for our children? You seen that video? That's a link to that one, yeah.
Sodom and Gomorrah, man.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, brand spanking new in the text lines is Joe from Harvest. Joe, we're glad you're there. He says Harvest, 5 miles from that station. Yeah, that's one of our station affiliates out of the Athens area. We got you plugged in, Joe. We appreciate you being a part of the show, man. Thanks for joining us. All right, I'll get the others later, and let me start the topic here. So the first topic, I'm going to get off of the library piece and go into energy sector. because the Biden administration has got, what, 37 days left in office, something like that? Jeez, I'm telling you right now, January 20th can't get here fast enough. Just, is there a way to accelerate the calendar? But the Biden administration is continuing to screw stuff up. And not a little bit. Like, they're doing all they can, right? Like, I don't know if you saw it or not. Like, just on a side note, that Biden issued more pardons last night than any president in their first term in the history of the United States has ever issued. Just slinging them out there, man. Who wants to get out of jail free card? Just slinging them. Just, God, it's gross. Anyway, bottom line is, in the energy sector, the Biden administration continues to hose us. So I've got a, let me tell you how I'm going to do this. Off the Grid is the name of this dipper, right? And we're going to talk about the grid per se in a few minutes. We're also going to talk about regulatory policy and about why you and I have to pay so much at the gas pump and what does it take and why are some places in the United States so much more expensive and why are we buying foreign oil? Well, it's because of jackwagon stuff like this. I'll start with a story that broke today, and this is part of the impetus for me putting this whole section together. In Alaska, everybody knows about the ANWR. That's the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. It's a huge swath of the grounds. It's a protected area under Section 102, and it's rich with oil. I mean, the resources in the ANWR are just mind-boggling. And the Biden administration has been shutting down any effort for oil and gas leases. Now, why are they called leases? Because they're on federally controlled land. Federally managed land can't be sold for this purpose, generally speaking, but they can provide oil and gas leases. Well, Congress has mandated, like this is congressionally mandated, leasing of Arctic National Wildlife Refuge space. And believe me, y'all, it's not like they go in there and just start tearing up the ground, all right? They have so many regulatory hoops they have to jump through. They have so many environmental burdens they have to make sure that they take care of. And they have to do everything as low impact as possible. But fossil fuel exploration in the ANWR is pretty much being shut down by the Biden administration in the last 5 weeks of the administration. So, story on Fox News, Dateline today, both of Alaska's U.S. senators, the state's governor, and local officials in the remote communities nearest the North Slope, which is the northern edge of the ANWR, collectively expressed that the Department of the Interior's planned January leasing sale was set up in bad faith. Said the governor of Alaska says the Biden administration in the past 4 years has been brutal on Alaska. They're in the twilight of their term, and they're doubling down on denying Alaska opportunities, denying our people opportunities, and denying America the opportunity to potentially get more oil exploration going into the future. So what are we talking about? Well, basically, the Biden administration is bowing to environmentalists, and they're going, yeah, so about those leases that we were congressionally mandated, we're just not going to follow through on that. That's just not going to happen. We're going to go ahead and say that most of the ground is off limits, and you can't do it, and just too bad for your luck. Listen, this is not new, though. They've been fighting this battle, and they've been slow-rolling the decision process. I've got a piece here I also pulled off Fox, dated back to March of 2022, 2.5 years almost. In an interview with Fox News Digital following his remarks at CPAC, the same governor, Mike Dunleavy, of Alaska, said a breaking point is indeed imminent for when the United States must stop relying on rival countries. So think about this. You've got a savings account, and it's got money in it. But rather than use your savings account when you were short and had to pay the bills, you decided to go, I don't know, down to the local loan shark and borrow money at 30% interest because that made good sense to you because you didn't want to use your savings. Does that ring like does that resonate in some way with some of you? That's what we're looking at right now. We have massive resources, and the ANWR is one of them. We have massive resources here in the United States, and no country does more in the world to preserve our natural resources and to care for and steward our natural resources than the United States. No, show me one. So the end result of this, though, is rather than use our natural resources, we choose to go to places like, Iran and Venezuela to buy our resources. And then you got Russia. that's selling to Iran and or purchasing from. You got Russian oil imports, you've got Venezuelan, you've got Iranian, and so the governor said this. He said we must reverse course and streamline permitting and drop regulations that restrict our oil and natural gas production. The Keystone Pipeline would have replaced Venezuela, Iran, and Russian imports. Biden canceled on the first day in office, and he's shutting down the leaseholds and that operation in Alaska in his last days in office. So resources, in terms of the oil and natural gas, we are rich. If you think about how big, if you look at the map of the world, the United States has more geography than the vast majority of nations in the world, by far. I mean, China and Russia may have land masses that are somewhat geographically equivalent. But the resources that we have are exponential. And yet the environmentalists keep worming their way into the executive branch and finding ways to shut down the ability for us to actually use what we have. And so we have to go to the loan sharks and borrow money to pay the bills, if you know what I'm saying. But then let's turn from just looking at, oh, by the way, let me do this real quick. Biden also, if you recall, drained our strategic petroleum reserves. Yeah, that makes good sense. Hey, I tell you what, this is what keeps us safe in case of the attack from a foreign nation or the zombie apocalypse or something. And the Strategic Petroleum Reserve held just 387.2 million barrels of oil as of November 1st, compared to 638 million that were there when Biden took office. But Biden is praising himself and his own administration because they've done a great deal to sort of up it from where it was, which was like down to 180 million barrels. They've been draining it. Why? So they could look good. That's why. Well, we're doing a thing. Well, the thing is not helping us. How about you drill? How about you quit pushing EVs so hard that you're trying to change the grid? All said and done, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve was just being raided by the Biden administration. And now they're bragging on themselves for bringing it back up to, about, 2/3 of what it was when he took office. Just boggles the mind, man. All right, but what about our grid? Do we have enough infrastructure? Do we? And that's a great question. And we're going to talk at the top of the hour with Brad Viator, who probably knows more about this than I ever will. But if you think about just the EV market alone, just the push from the Biden administration to demand that by the year 2030, we would see, over half of vehicles on the road be electric. Well, they got to get charged somehow. Can our grid even sustain that? And is our grid able to sustain our current needs right now? Is the baseline load able to be met? Do we have enough, high capacity transmission lines? Do we have enough of what they call the last mile, lower transmission lines? The total amount of electricity all being generated and kept in the queue, can renewables really sustain that? And is it even feasible to think that we can convert in just a matter of a few years? And what would it cost if we did? And I'll be honest with you, I don't think the answer is one that the environmentalists really want, because what it means is what they're trying to say we can do can't happen. We'll talk with an expert at the top of the hour, but right now we'll take a break. We'll come right back. Y'all, I'm telling you, the electric vehicle boom sounds cool on paper, but all they're doing is gerrymandering our grid and pushing the free market into places where it was never designed to go. Off the grid, that's where we are. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Making common sense like a superpower. What if I told you that the better mousetrap was being suppressed by the government because they wanted you to have the lesser mousetrap, and they were even going to subsidize the lesser mousetrap with your tax dollars? And you were supposed to buy it. Then they're going to pass laws that said the lesser mousetrap, the least efficient mousetrap, was the one you have to buy. Why? Because they had a notion, they had an agenda, they liked the lesser mousetrap. Well, that's where we are with EVs. But EVs, though, are notional at best. If they can't be charged, what good are they? Do we have the infrastructure? We talked about it multiple times on the show here, but the grid right now, we're seeing domestic electricity demand, according to a story I've got here from CNBC last year, domestic electricity demand in 2022 was expected to increase when they reviewed all the data. They're looking for like an 18% increase. And by 2035, it would be 38% from where we are now. It's seen as being an almost unsustainable increase if the demands that were being called for by the Build a Better Mousetrap people, if the demands that were being called for are put in place. So one guy from a grid strategy group, he said, we got to allow a power demand coming to the country we really didn't have for like the last 25 years. So here's the deal. Think about it this way. It's just like retail stores. If there's a run, I know, here's a good one. If you've got, remember when Beanie Babies were all the craze? Everybody had to have one. Everybody's going to the store looking for the Beanie Babies. They can't. You're looking at me like you don't know what I'm talking about.
Is that before my time?
It's before your time. All right. Dadgum. Now I got to. How about what was the Elmo thing that they had for a while?
I was an Elmo kid.
Tickle Me Elmo.
Yes.
Okay. Were you an Elmo kid?
Oh yeah.
Did you really?
I was a big time Elmo kid. Yeah. Elmo and Sesame Street.
Oh man, we're getting off on a tangent here now. All right, Tickle Me Elmo, the big huge Christmas thing. Everybody had, or Cabbage Patch dolls or something. Everybody had to have it. There's a run on the store. Who's got them? Well, you got supply and demand. All right. It's the same with electricity. Supply and demand. And if you can't supply the needs because the demand is too high, then you got a problem, and the grid has to be built out. But what about if you have more demand than supply? Okay, back it up. What if you have more supply than demand? Well, that's great. Then rates come down. What happens when you have absolute need that can't be met? It creates an inflationary aspect. They have to charge more because they're doing more to build out more to meet up with demand. So what they're saying here is we're going to force demand to increase with EVs and other electrifications in the Green New Deal. We're going to force changes in the grid, but somebody pays for it. It doesn't just happen. It happens through friggin' rate increases. It happens through infrastructure build out. It happens through local taxes. And the consumer winds up paying for it. So they mandate the consumer buy more stuff, in this case, electricity, and then the supply side can't meet it. So the supply side has to raise the rates on the people who were told they had to have it. It's just a jacked up way of doing an economy. What it means, though, is that we have to make major changes to the grid. A story here on CNBC that I told you I was looking at says more high voltage transmission lines to transport electricity. You got to have, if you're going to have rural wind and solar plants, you got to get wire lines out to them, right? Because you got to transmit the power sourcing to the power consumer. Smaller distribution lines and transformers for last mile electricity, hardware like inverters. And then you got, oh my gosh, holy cow, the number of environmental impact studies. Every county that has new lines run through it has to approve things. Municipalities have to have a play in this. Are there going to be localized or other subsidies that have to be put in place? Is it for a power generation project, or for that matter, is it a consumer, like a new plant being built? Well, everything has to have everybody's buy-in. And so right now, the Biden-Harris administration is closing down portions of our grid, shutting down our ability for energy production. And even this point, I'm looking at a story that I pulled off the Institute for Energy Research. Dateline last week. The Biden-Harris administration is also halting new coal leases in the Powder River Basin. By the way, the Powder River Basin in Wyoming is one of the largest sourcing of what they call subbituminous coal, which is like low sulfur content. It doesn't make as much pollution. The region is responsible for supplying 40% of the nation's coal. 40%, and they just shut down new coal leases on the way out the door. This is unbelievable.
Reckless.
It is. Our energy generation, our grid, our capability of being energy independent. January 20th can't get here fast enough. Coming up, we'll talk to a guy who knows more about it than me, Brad Viator from B Strategies. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back.
You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama's syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. Man, we got the local, the state, the national, sometimes the international. And oh yeah, like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to hour number 2 here on a Turbo Thursday, getting you all the way to Friday. That's the plan. But we're going to bring on a guest right now. So for the last, 20 minutes or so, I've been talking about Dipper number 1 on the show. I call it Off the Grid. I'm talking about what is happening with our grid, what's happening with our energy supply. How about supply versus demand? Where are we? And can we sustain the policies that are being put out by the Biden administration? And then you got to wonder what's going to happen now that we know that Trump is taking office in just a mere matter of weeks. Well, coming on right now is Brad Viator. He's with a firm called Be Strategic out of Washington, D.C. He founded that in 2022 after spending a long career leading different energy companies and they're advising them on complex legislative, regulatory, media challenges, all the things related to energy. He's a public affairs guy. He's spent any number of time in the policy in the wonkish side of what I would call the regulatory environment. He's also got his Bachelor of Science from Texas A&M. So I guess he's an SEC guy. He's on the phone right now. Brad Viator, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for making some time. So, well, let me just ask you up front. What are your give me the glossy version first. What are your expectations in terms of the change in the regulatory and the policy environment between Biden to Trump that you see coming right now?
I think that, and this is something that I was having a discussion with a friend earlier today who was a political appointee in the Trump administration the last time. I was like, I think everybody in Washington has it wrong right now. They expect that we're going to get back to just sort of regular status quo. A guy is coming into office that we know and understand. A lot of these policies like the IRA and IIJA, 2 policies that were big energy policy priorities for the Biden administration, are going to be retained because Republicans are benefiting from these policies. And frankly, I think they're wrong. I think we've seen Donald Trump come in and mess things up. He is going to ensure that the status quo is changed, and he's going to offer a disruptive viewpoint. So I think we need to buckle up and get ready for a heck of a ride.
So when you say disruptive, you talking disruptive in a good sense, like taking all this stuff, throwing it out and doing it a different way? Or are you talking about disruptive like this could be painful?
Oh, both. Definitely both. I think that the plan will be disruption for good, but I think some babies will be thrown out with the bathwater. I think that in every sort of scenario, right, like the bad things are what get the headlines, but there are some good things that are buried beneath them. I think it'll be directionally an improvement and kind of a disruption of the status quo and the way things work in Washington, which is largely good. But I think there will definitely be some hiccups along the way.
All right, so you say largely good. Let me ask you. So for the last 4 years, we have seen, in terms of the energy sector, in terms of supply side, we've seen a difference in the way things have been done in the past. You know, we've had the Keystone Pipeline was stopped. We had while we hear that drilling is up, it's still not where it could be, and so we've more than one occasion drained the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, that kind of thing. Do you see us getting more into domestic energy production? Before we even get to the grid, how about domestic energy? Are we going to see that increase?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you saw that in the interview, one of the interviews I saw the president do, I think it was on NBC, or I'm sorry, President-elect, former president, do on NBC or ABC over the weekend, kind of, the first sort of real televised interview talking about some of these policy issues. And he said, we're going to drill, baby, drill. And I don't have any reason to believe that that's not going to be the case. I think they're going to be spending a fair amount of time at the beginning trying to think about how they can get those leases solved for. They're also going to be thinking about, what to do with the natural gas distribution system in this country. There is a lot of demand on that system, and this gets into the electricity side of the ledger. There's a lot of demand for new natural gas generation, and that requires natural gas pipelines to get the fuel supply to where those plants are, and I think that's what we're going to see.
So let's talk about the grid then. You just mentioned it, the natural gas. You got of course the electrical generation, but then you've also got the transmission lines, high capacity or low capacity, the last mile to the houses. Do we have a grid that is A, sustainable, and B, meets current needs, or are we already lacking anything in that regard?
Look, it depends on where you are. Depends on where you live. Energy for forever has been a regional issue. It comes down to, what sort of energy supply you have in your region and what sort of energy transmission and distribution and delivery you have in your region. There are very much haves and have-nots when it comes to the energy grid. There are parts of the country that are very well equipped for growth, and there are parts of the country that can't handle, one more kilowatt of demand. And it really is a patchwork quilt and a regional story. I'll tell you, since you're broadcasting from the Southeast is ready. The Southeast has a very stable energy grid that has been making investments in the systems for generations and generations. They haven't turned their back on coal. They haven't turned their back on natural gas. They've built the only 2 new nuclear plants in this country in the last 40 years. So they're making investments in infrastructure. Some other jurisdictions are not. I'm a Texan, and yes, I'm, I guess, an SEC fan. Been there for 12, 13 years. We can't figure out how to win the big game, but we're definitely a part of the mix. And my home state of Texas is a mess.
Yeah.
Like what they've got, they are not prepared for any growth. We saw that after Winter Storm Uri. California is a similar problem. They're, Gavin Newsom's getting on the phone and saying, hey, if you wouldn't mind turning your thermostats up to 85 degrees so we can get through the night, that'd be fantastic. That's what they have to do. New England's a similar problem, but there are big sort of industrial regions of the country that are pretty well equipped, from the Southeast, the sort of Southwest, the Pacific Northwest even. Big chunks of the Midwest are in a good place, but the Northeast, really down to D.C., California, and Texas are in a whole world of hurt.
So let me ask you though, in that regard, with the like for instance, people talk about, they call them renewables when they talk about adding wind or solar to the portfolio for an energy sector provider. When they talk about doing this, you still have to have the transmission lines to get into the grid with those systems. So everything has to be built. It's not like it just you put the solar panels out and start generating electricity. But that being said, they don't seem to sustain the same way coal and gas fired plants do, or even hydro for that matter do, and much less nuclear. So are we going to wind up seeing a greater emphasis on all of the above, or are we going to wind up seeing under the Trump administration a pulling back from the wind and solar?
Yep. So let me answer that question, and then you said a bunch of other things that I want to talk about too,
okay,
if you'll indulge me.
Yeah, we got about 3 minutes to the break.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so a couple things we'll say. Number one, do I think there will continue to be the same size incentives for all those renewables? Absolutely not. Yeah. Do I think we will be focusing, the Trump administration will be focusing attention on encouraging the development of fossil and other dispatchable resources to include things like nuclear? Yes. Do I think the proliferation of renewables will continue? Also yes, even without subsidy, because as a practical matter, they are cheaper to build and they have shorter permitting timelines. So I suspect that there will continue to be a proliferation on that front. You said something, though, that is interesting, and I've been doing a fair amount of research on this lately. which is the sort of development and deployment of excess renewable energy actually makes the grid itself less stable and more reliable upon natural gas. The reason being, whenever you have a renewable resource like a solar resource, sometimes a cloud comes over the house. Sometimes it's nighttime, and that solar resource cannot provide the power that's necessary. The utility has to have other resources available to supply all those customers when the solar doesn't show up. So what that means is, for all the sort of renewables that are out there, you have to match that supply with dispatchable resources. And where you have these places that have a huge proliferation of renewables, that just means you have to have more dispatchable to match that demand. And, you know, we're sort of at this point where some states have built more renewables than they need to support their existing supply.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So you're paying for electricity that you don't need.
And I guess you guys saw that in Texas just a couple of years ago in that massive freeze when you had wind, the towers, the fans were just basically freezing up and they couldn't even be used.
Yep, that was true. You also had natural gas wellheads that froze up, and gas supplies couldn't move either. So if the wind were to show up and then drop offline, there wasn't the gas to backfill it. I mean, it's a whole mess over there in Texas.
Well, listen, we got to take a break right now. Brad, can you hang on during the break? We'll come back and spend a few more minutes. I want to talk about the sustainability of our grid and whether or not our grid is safe. You got a few more minutes?
Absolutely.
All right. We're on with Brad Viator, who is with Be Strategic out of D.C. He's an expert in basically the regulatory and legislative environment for energy. We'll talk to him more when we get back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Saving the world one soundbite at a time. All right, we're going right back now for a few more minutes with our guest, Brad Viator from B Strategic out of D.C. He's an advisor on legislative and regulatory matters related to the energy sector. And hey, Brad, so we were talking a while ago, and you gave us a lot of thoughts about where things are headed, where they've been. But let me ask you this, in terms of our grid overall, you said the Southeast is fairly prepared. I mean, that's Southern Company and TVA down here, generally speaking, among all the rural co-ops that generate too. But as we look in the big picture, how is our national grid? I know you said it's mostly regional, but how is our national grid in terms of being secure, being able to be sustained in the event of a natural disaster or for that matter, a bad actor from afar?
The question that you're asking, the word we talk about in the industry is resilience, right? Like how resilient is this energy grid? And again, it's a patchwork quilt. Like the places that have been making investment in the grid are able to respond to disaster and recover relatively quickly. I'll give you a great example of Florida. 15 years ago or so, Florida, in the wake of just being pummeled by hurricanes, went in and made a bunch of new investment in things like concrete poles so that when power lines fall down, they're able to go back and restring and rebuild the system, and the outages are a heck of a lot shorter. So it's again a patchwork quilt, and there's a little bit of luck involved in it when you're talking about things like natural disaster. Like in the Southeast, we face a lot of really bad weather, and so we do deal with some outages as a result of things like hurricanes. Other parts of the country, like in California, they have a bunch of risk in and around wildfire. That's been pretty well documented lately. And they have a system that they hadn't been making a bunch of investment in. Similar situation up in New England as well. They have a system that they haven't been making a bunch of investments in. So when they have outages, those outages tend to last longer. And it's a regional issue. Like if you're in a place that has been making investments into the electric system, it's going to be more prepared. If you're in one where you've just let that resource go fallow because you think that, coal production or natural gas production or electricity and industrialization is a bad thing, those resources are less prepared for what's coming.
Yeah. So let me ask then about, you mentioned resilience, and that's the ability to bounce back, I guess. But what about the ability to resist in general? Is our grid secure from bad actors? You talk about hackers. We talk about people that would in some way try to sabotage. I mean, how capable are we of defending our grid before the need for resilience even arises?
Yeah, it's a pretty reliable system. 99.999% reliability is sort of where we're operating. 99.98 maybe is the number. It's a very high reliability factor. We're in a pretty good place when it comes to that. I mean, as a practical matter, we haven't seen widespread sort of outage caused by a cyber attack. There was that big outage back in 2003 that people talk about up in the PJM region, caused by a squirrel, among other things. But really, since that's happened, we've largely kept the grid up. There've been a couple of vigilante attacks that we've seen that have had an impact on the grid. We saw that one over in North Carolina, and then we saw about 10 years ago the Metcalf incident up in Northern California with, vigilantes with high-powered rifles who knew what to shoot at, take parts of the system down. But as a practical matter, we've avoided it. I think the challenge is these nation-state actors that are organizing some of these attacks are getting better at it, and we've got to figure out how to stay a step ahead of them, and it only takes, one bad one to have a real impact. But under this point, the evidence that I'm seeing is that we've done a pretty good job of mitigating that risk, but it's something that we got to stay on top of.
Well, Brad, listen, we're up against it, man, and I appreciate you spending almost a full half hour with us. And listen, Brad Viator, be strategic. I'd like to keep you on speed dial, and as the Trump administration comes in and things change, maybe have you as a resource to come back on and explain where we are. Okay.
Would love to do it. Thanks so much for having me, Phil.
All right, thanks, Brad. Appreciate you. Well, listen, I just think this is pretty amazing, and it's interesting what he said too when you get down to it. That Trump administration is going to come in, and there are some who believe it's going to be painful, and some who believe it's going to go smoothly, and that he's going to break stuff. But I think that's what we wanted. We wanted somebody to come in and say, and he said it himself. Brad did, get rid of the status quo. I think that's what's about to happen. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio, coming up next. Butters and Lee. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right, just covering down on some major ground across the northern half of the most beautiful state in the nation. This one I'm talking about it, y'all. It's Alabama. I mean to say this show goes like way down south of Birmingham and up north of Huntsville and Tuscaloosa, back to Gadsden, parts of Georgia, Tennessee, and even Mississippi, all thrown in just for good measure. All right, going to another section. We just did the whole thing there about off the grid. And by the way, breaking news that Elon Musk just reached $400 billion in personal net worth. Gosh.
I think your comparison to Tony Stark's pretty spot on.
He's Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sidetracked.
He's probably got an Iron Man suit in his basement somewhere.
If he doesn't, he's going to have one soon. and I want one. All right, so listen, this is that time of the week we go to this segment, this gathering with folks that really add a whole lot of flavor to who we are and what we do here at Rightside Media. And we like to call this section Butters and Lee, and I'll just go ahead and call the roll real quick. Calling in from Huntsville, Lee from Huntsville, are you there?
I'm here.
You're here. That's good. We're glad. And sitting right here in studio, so I don't even have to call the roll. I just look at him and go, hey, Butters, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great once you unmute my mic. I'll have words with your producer
later. That was not a passive-aggressive thing on my part, not at all. All right, I pronounce it. It's time for Butters and Lee. All right, here's the deal. So for the benefit of our audience who may or may not know, this is what we do. We spend the first round me asking them questions and getting their thoughts on some things that are in the news. And then we come back from the break and they flip the script on me and they ask me questions. I don't even know what's coming. So we're just going to just see how it goes. All right, here's my first question. Oh my gosh, there's a story in 1819 News. It's unbelievable. Y'all may have seen it. We got another library controversy right now in Fairhope and Spanish Fort. Sexually explicit books being put on the shelf in the teenage section. What's it going to take for librarians to realize the general public is sick of this? And I guess my follow-up question is the general public really sick of this? Lee, you first.
The general public as a whole is sick of it, yes. I would like to point out that Fairhope is decidedly more liberal than most of Alabama as a little artsy place. Spanish Fort, not I don't think as much, but so there is that aspect of it. But as a whole, I don't really care if they are. I don't care if an entire community says we think we should show porn on a loop on the wall of the library while it's open. Doesn't mean you should do it as a city, and it doesn't mean that you should have basic common decency standards as a city, which you should. Otherwise, what if a city agrees that kids should be able to drink it at 16 or buy cigarettes at 14? Just because people might say, yeah, that's cool, doesn't mean it's okay. There are decisions you have to make as a government entity and like the library board. So the library board has come up with these standards, and if those cities don't meet them, they will lose their funding, full stop. Right. And if they can afford to lose their funding and fire librarians, then I guess that's going to be the end result. Madison County decided to, kind of back away from that, seeing the implications of losing $500,000, and agreed to abide by the standards.
So is that where we are? I mean, is that what it's going to take to get librarians? And by the way, there's a lot of good librarians out there, a lot of sweet, folks that run libraries. I get it. But there are some knuckleheads who get into it with an activist mentality. Are we looking at just having to fire people? Is that where we are?
I mean, I'm not saying we as the public would be doing it. They would lose money, and they would probably end up having to reduce force because they're going to lose funding. Yeah. Limestone County has lost funding, and they're having issues there. So, yeah, there's going to be problems.
All right, Butterman, you're the dad of some teenage girls. Well, actually, they're a little older now. But what do you think? I mean, what's it going to take?
I think it's going to take more folks like Lee and Emily Jones getting involved with things like Moms for Liberty and local action. I think this is a symptom of a lot of other stuff that's gone on, that's developed in our, what's the curriculum in our schools. And, bottom line, it's going to take people getting involved, like actually running for school boards and library boards and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I've said it a bajillion times on your show. The local is what's going to affect our day to day. I think this in particular is I'd say a generational, conditioning of what's deemed appropriate, and is it okay to say this isn't okay? I think we've got a long time of our society saying, well, I don't want to really tell you it's not okay.
Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right. And that's just, so I think, and yes, I think the vast majority, as would, you could tell from the election, I think the vast majority of the people, at least in America, are kind of done.
Yeah. Kind of baked on all this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I think that, so you guys nailed it. I think it's going to take community involvement. I think it's going to take people getting individually involved, and I think it's going to take some teeth in this. Like Lee said, the follow through on the loss of funding, or for that matter, the loss of jobs, because people can't seem to get a grip on the fact that these are kids, and you sexualizing children without parental consent is just not okay. And and I look at it too, and I'm going to ask Erica Thomas when she comes on the show later. Like, how did this book even get there? How does somebody take a sexually graphic book and look at it? And where did they go buy it? Was it donated? And then they put it in the system and marked it for the kids section, so they knew it was there. Who did this and
I
why?
can tell you how.
How?
Well, so the publishers push these books out to the librarians, and there's a lot of the younger librarians that are curating sections that are much more liberal. I mean, like to the moon. And the publishers push these books out. They've proliferated a lot in the last 5 to 7, 8 years. Because if you think about it, before 8 or 10 years ago, you didn't see a lot of this at all.
No.
This has been relatively recent.
Yep.
And they push them out, and the publishers will list a lower age on there than is absolutely lower than should be appropriate, and that's to sell more books and to push agendas. The librarians bring them in. They put them in the sections recommended by the publishers.
Well, go ahead.
I'll remind you that up to a few years ago, we could tell what a man and a woman was. So,
Right.
And so could all our Supreme Court justices.
Right.
It was it was a novel thing. All right, we better move on before I run out of time on that one. But I just there's so much more to this story, and I get what you're saying. The publishers do push it out, and the publishers might recommend, but somebody still had to in process that book at the library and put it in the system, and then actually set it on the shelf, thinking, this is a good thing. And it takes no more than a flip of a few pages to go, wow, this book is out there. All right, next question, and I happen to know that I'm sitting in studio with a guy who has an unmanned aerial systems license. Drones over U.S. sites, all over the place, they're causing massive concern, and I'm not going to mitigate it. It's kind of weird. Allegations are being made they're being piloted by a foreign entity. The DOD denies that, but the DOD also says they don't know what they are, so how can they deny it? I don't know. But no one seems to have any answers, and Congress is starting to get involved. Listen, bottom line is this: drones flying over sensitive sites, municipalities, anywhere for that matter. What do you think? And should we trust the Biden administration to even do something about it at all? You first this time, Butterman.
Well, so I will start out with
your UAS license.
No, I will start out with drawing the comparison to the assassination attempts and the incompetence that we've seen out of federal entities like the Secret Service. I mean, I don't want to, speak poorer of a lot of guys that are trying to do good stuff, but the incompetence of defending our airspace and how all this works, I'm honestly not surprised that it's kind of got everybody in a tailspin. I'm not sure. I mean, none of the information that's out there is going to be really reliable to deal with, based on my experience having, done carrier strike group staff where we're monitoring the airspace around a carrier. I never really got into the airspace defense of North America. Yes, I've flown around the U.S. quite a bit, and it's a very odd thing. It's a very. I'm not sure whether to go down more of the, what the heck are you incompetent people doing, or okay, somebody's keeping something close to the vest for some reason.
Yeah, good
or bad. And there's solid arguments to, well, we're not going to tell the general public what all we know because we don't want whoever to know.
So in your opinion, before I go to Lee, in your opinion, having you've already gone through the testing, you got your UAS license, all that kind of stuff. You've seen some of the stuff, and you're a Navy pilot. So is there? I mean, some of these drones are allegedly the size of an SUV. Doesn't that strike you as not being a hobbyist?
That definitely. That is
Okay.
definitely odd, but we are definitely in a lot of stuff is progressing very quickly in that world. So it's not shocking to hear that there's some pretty sophisticated systems that are out there.
Okay, Lee, weigh in here. Drones over U.S. installations, some of which are sensitive, like Picatinny Arsenal up in New Jersey is a sensitive site. What are your thoughts?
I think it's disturbing. I think it's very disturbing that nobody seems to know, or, well, they don't want to tell us. I have full faith they know, but they don't want to tell us. And some of these, they saw a swarm coming from offshore onto shore in New Jersey. Like, where are these coming from?
Yeah.
And I think that not telling us anything is going to lead to a lot more issues than just telling us, honestly, the U.S. government. Just stop trying to keep people in the dark. That's dumb. Surely they've at least rounded up a few of these already. And it kind of reminds me of that balloon that floated across the United States,
Yes.
from China. And everybody's like, wonder what's going on. And then finally they're like, go ahead and take it down now that it got past the whole entire United States into the ocean. And I look at this and I think, okay, well, Joe Biden's about to leave office. And maybe some of these foreign powers that wink, wink, nod, nod, might have some deals going, recognize that they don't have much longer to collect information on it.
Well, and I would hope first of all, I hope that's not the case. But I would also hope that they recognize they're not going to have much time left to do something. But the whole thing just smacks of, like for instance, JP and I were talking off air earlier, and the point was made in the conversation that either A, they know what's happening and they won't say, which is bad, or B, they don't know anything about what's happening, which is also bad. There's nothing good about the situation. We got drones flying over people's communities and sensitive sites. It's just whacked.
So weren't you just talking about the vulnerability of the grid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems like some really obvious answers, right? The obvious things that people have been talking about for a long time. I will say in the drone world, there's a lot of issues with, this new technology and what are we doing? Well, maybe we've just gotten to a point where now we're seeing what's happening when we don't actually have a clear, concise plan on how to deal with this stuff. So,
yeah, and these drones can be flown from the far side of the world. They have to have a launch pad somewhere, but they can be flown from the far side of the world if you got the satellite capability. Listen, I think this bears a lot, and I've got a whole dipper on this today, and I'm wondering if I'm going to get to it, but nonetheless. We're taking a break right now, though. That's round one of Butters and Lee talking about topics that are near and dear to our heart, but then we're going to come right back, and they flip the script and ask me questions, and I just wait with bated breath to see what we got. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. We are back. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Making common sense like a superpower. And oh, by the way, we're in Butters and Lee, round number 2. This is where they ask me questions, and I'll go ladies first. Lee, what question do you have for Mwa?
Okay, so I've been watching the situation in Syria.
Oh, yeah.
Assad is gone. Went to Russia. Things are changing there. They're rebuilding the government, essentially, new leadership, and there's a lot of Syrians all over the world that are celebrating, of course. And in some of the countries, especially Germany, who has the most Syrians, I think, outside of Turkey, are saying, well, how about y'all go back now? So my question is, what do you think the legality and the morality is of telling these people, okay, you came here, we took care of you because of this situation, but now we think you should go back because you're a drain on our economy?
Well, so yes, you asking me ethically, morally, or legally? Because legally, it's going to depend upon the law of the nation in which they sit as to whether they're going to deport or just incentivize to go home. Morally, ethically, yeah. If you were escaping for reasons that no longer exist, then maybe it's time to go back. And then the other piece of this is, what do they take back with them? And where do they go when they get there? Because is what they left behind gone, or is it still there? I don't know. It's a huge question. But I tell you what, though, we have to watch Syria, because Israel did the entire world a favor in the last 48 hours. Israel went in and basically destroyed a huge level of military capacity that the Syrian government, that the fallen government, left behind. But here's the other thing, and I was listening to some commentary earlier this morning about this. Syria is a nation that has used gas or chemical weapons on its own people. So they have chemical weapons stockpiles. It's considered part of the W&D environment. If they have chemical weapons stockpiles that still exist, and now the government that used to protect those stockpiles is gone, who's got them? And who's going to ensure that they don't fall into the wrong hands and get sold on the open market to other bad actors? So the whole thing is a mess.
Which could definitely happen considering the situation there
and
the different parties that are kind of vying for control.
Absolutely it is. So to answer your question about sending people back, I don't know that I can answer that fully. I think some will go back because they want to see what life's going to be like back in their home country. But I'm telling you right now, though, don't take your eyes off Syria, and let's hope we don't get sucked into something bigger than we ever want to be a part of. All right, run out of time. Before I do that, let me go to Butterman. What question do you have for me?
So, a guy that's a valedictorian, goes to an Ivy League school.
Oh, geez.
Gets a 3D printed firearm and a 3D printed suppressor or silencer. He gets a fake ID to cover his tracks, and then just is chilling at McDonald's with all the paraphernalia on him.
Yeah. Still in his backpack with a manifesto.
Are we really are we really supposed to buy this?
Are you going conspiracy theory on me here?
I'm really struggling. I guess maybe talk me out of it. Talk me out of it that this is like bizarro land, which says a lot in 2024.
If he died in the mountains like Eric Rudolph, or if he died like the Unabomber, and we never really knew, I'd be curious. But I think right now, at the very least, they did get him having a meltdown and yelling his thoughts to the crowd when the perp walk was taking place. They were walking him into the jail.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. If he didn't have, it just all didn't add up. It just really weird.
They have like an orgy of evidence on him, literally. Like you never find that. The gun, a manifesto, like a guilt note. I mean, for God's sake, it's all crazy.
It is crazy, and right now it's what we got. But listen, the thing that bothers me as much as anything, though, is watching members of the progressive left make him into some kind of Bonnie and Clyde folk hero. It's just gross. But yeah,
I just mean 3D printed, like it just doesn't add up. There's too much. why are you doing some things right and some things so egregiously wrong?
He's right up there with the guy that shot Trump. Like, how did that happen? How did the kid with no attachments to anything climb a ladder in front of police and get on the roof in full visual sight of the president? And
You're
get
not
a
suggesting
shot
there's
off
a
at his-
conspiracy there, are you?
I'm sorry. Did I go there? All right, listen, that's it. That was fast. All right, Butters and Lee, love you both. Thank you much. We'll be right back with Erica Thomas from 1819 News talking about, oh my gosh, the book they found in the public library in Fairhope. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back.
You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama's syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. Man, we got the local, the state, the national, covering down on all the issues. And, oh, yeah, like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Welcome to hour number 3. This show is flying by. We're going to go to the phones right now. We're switching topics. I'm in number 2 of the Triple Dipper. I'm calling this the Library Wars. I've used that title multiple times because, you know what? There's a war going on in our libraries. Who would have gone and ever figured that libraries would be controversial? I mean, the place where you go and it's quiet and you can just read a book or study for a test or whatever, and all of a sudden it's controversial. Well, 1819 News, y'all know that we have a close relationship with the folks at 1819 News. We all came out of the same spot. Rightside and 1819 were both birthed out of the same organization, the Alabama Policy Institute. And a friend of mine was one of the early folks who got on board. She's an OG at 1819. Erica Thomas, she's the editor-at-large, and she just published a story this morning, which is top on their website right now at 1819news.com. And the headline, let me read you the headline: Kinks, Fantasies, and Porn. Graphic sex guide offered in teen section of Spanish Fort and Fairhope Public Libraries. My gosh. Erica Thomas, how are you doing, my friend?
Howdy, Phil. It's so good to hear from you. It's been so long, and I moved down to South Alabama a couple of years ago. Actually, 2 years ago today, I moved, and I really missed my North Alabama folks, so it's good to be with y'all today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And by the way, as much as this article you wrote disgusts me, thank you for writing it. Because and by the way, you even said off the air a minute ago, y'all had to publish the pictures because you knew that some folks would downplay the article if you didn't.
Yeah, well, and I've been covering these library issues for over a year now, and I go into libraries and I look for things because, you know, I didn't start this on my own. Someone came to me and said, "You really should look into the library over in Foley. They have some books in the children's and teen sections that are just very graphic and, you know, they have sexually explicit content." So I went and looked, and within a few minutes, I found my first bits of evidence. And then I've kind of just, what I've done is just shown what's going on. You know, okay, this is what taxpayer money is going to pay for.
Yeah.
I think it's important for the people to know, and it's my job to inform. So then I started going from library to library, and over time, a lot of people have come against what we're doing, come against 1819 News. They've come against me personally. I've been yelled at. So I feel like at this point, the only way to really get the point across is to just show what I'm talking about, because there's this feeling from these people that they're being attacked. Even though they're actually the ones that make the threats, they feel they're being attacked and that constitutional rights are being attacked because, you know, parents should be able to allow their children to read whatever they want. Okay, that's fine, but should taxpayers fund pornography for children?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No.
And so I think once you see this, there's no defending it. There's no question. There's no parent in their right mind that would look at this and say, I would let my kids look at this. There's none. And if you are that parent, and I've said this several times, you either need help or jail time, period.
Help or jail time. And I totally agree. And I got to ask you, because the book is so incredibly graphic, that you look at it and think there's no way in the world somebody, authored this book with any less intent than trying to sexualize children. And it's not just, by the way, it's not just like things that are like, you know, here's how sex operates and the birds and the bees and all that. No, it's like way out there fetish and kink stuff. And it even calls it fetish and kink in the book. That's crazy. And it's in kids sections.
Yeah, I mean, in the title itself, it's a teen's guide. So there you go. You know, that's all you need to know. And to me, a lot of these books really should be relocated to the adult section. But what adult wants to pick up a book that says it's a teen's guide to anything?
What,
So I don't think in this case that would be the right thing to do. I think it just needs to go. And I did look up a little bit on the authors. It's a married couple, Matthew Nolan and Erica Moen. And I put this in the article just to kind of give people an idea of what we're dealing with here. These people are from Oregon, and they live with their cat, Flapjack. And they go around and they do different conferences, like teen-type book reading events, that sort of thing. And it appears that they really are wanting to sexualize children and expose children to this pornography. And I would say in this particular book, there are instructions on how to do things that teens,
but
even some adults wouldn't do. I mean, it is that graphic.
it really is. And I got to ask you a few other questions before I get to it about the sort of the official policy positions and what the local officials are saying and the library people. I got to ask you this. The very first picture on the page is of the cover on 1819 News is of the cover, and it shows the barcode and the basically the registration of the book within the public library. In other words, it didn't get slipped on the shelf accidentally. It was brought in and in process. Somebody put it in the Dewey Decimal System. It is there on purpose.
Yeah.
So is there any understanding as to how this thing got in processed like that and thought to be a good idea for the teen section?
Yes, this is actually one of the books that, one of many, that have been put in either a children's or teen section in libraries, not only across Baldwin County, but the entire state of Alabama. So how it got there is in Spanish Fort, the library is actually its own city department. So it's kind of like, maintenance department. They have a director. All these departments have a director. Well, the library director is the one that's in charge of the library. So ultimately, they're responsible for making sure this crap doesn't get put in front of children. And I did attempt to talk to that library director in Spanish Fort yesterday. Her name is Shanavia Reed or Shanavia Reed. I'm not really sure how to say her name. And I hate that I just messed that up so bad, but I did try to talk to her, but she was in her office and she refused to come out of her office. So
Wow.
Then I tried to talk to the mayor to see, the mayor and the council have to be in charge of, everything. So what is your culpability here? And the mayor sent me a statement late last night basically saying, they have to defend the Constitution and the freedom of speech. And, he kind of put this on the state and federal governments as well. So, it wasn't exactly what I was expecting from the Spanish Fort Mayor, Mike McMillan, because I just thought for sure when I talked to him yesterday, I said, I promise I'm not being dramatic. This is really bad. And I sent him pictures of what I saw. And that was the response that I got. So I was pretty shocked by that.
Well, I can tell you right now, he went to the city general counsel, their attorney, and they developed some benign thing that neither admits nor denies anything, and then talked about Constitution. But you know what? They have what's known as discretion. They have official discretion as to what books they can put. They can choose to reject any book. They can reject Tom Sawyer if they want to, but the reality is they have discretion to put books on a shelf or not, and they chose to do it, and now he's not owning up to it.
Well, the good news is a lot of these libraries get funding from the Alabama Public Library System, APLS, and so that's going to end. If they keep doing this, it will be over very soon, mark my word. There is a new process in place. There are new regulations. They're extremely clear. There's no exceptions to the rules. You can't do loopholes. You just cannot have this stuff available for juveniles anymore.
Well,
and so I did talk this afternoon or yesterday to John Wall.
Yeah.
He's the chairman of the APLS. He's also the GOP chairman in Alabama. And he just had very strong words and kind of said what I just said. Like, they're going to keep looking. They're going to make sure people are following these rules and regulations. And when they don't, they will pull that taxpayer money. And he is looking to make examples out of people, out of libraries that don't comply.
Well,
So is the whole board. They're tired of this.
yeah,
and so we'll see what happens.
another good friend of mine is on that board, Amy Minton, and she's wonderful.
Yes.
And so I listen. We're going to come back after the break and talk about it more, kind of wrap up this. But just for those of y'all that are out there listening, in the teen section of your local library, the book is called "Let's Talk About It." And I would challenge you to look in your library, see if it's there. By the way, Erica, before we go to the break, you told me this is in Spanish Fort and Fairhope, but in one of those libraries, the book was actually on the listing, but it was checked out. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That was in Fairhope. I couldn't get the book in Fairhope because it had been checked out, which means it's in somebody's hands right now.
This song is messed up. All right, listen, Erica, we're taking a break. Can you hang on during the break?
Sure.
All right, we're taking a break. We're with Erica Thomas. She's the editor-at-large at 1819 News, talking about this. And y'all, listen, if you haven't seen the article, go look at it, 1819news.com. We're not kidding. This thing is like out there, graphic, gross. Why is it in the kids section? We'll be right back.
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Just, I mean, like, man,
Pulling pins on truth grenades. That's what we're doing. All right, so I'm going back to the phones right now with Erica Thomas. She's the editor at large at 1819 News. Wrote a piece that came out today on this absolutely heinous book that describes like unusual sex acts and kinkish fantasies and fetishes and all that kind of stuff for kids. For kids. It's in the teen section of the library. Hey, Erica, I got to ask you another question about the book real quick.
Okay.
So there's a part in your article where you point out that the book says it also has a somewhat disrespectful tone towards parents, and it makes the comment in the book, this is a quote, "They're always telling us to just avoid sex, but maybe we ought to be getting some help for the sex we might already be having." Like, it's almost like pitting kids against their parents in the book.
Yeah, in my stories that I've done for 1819 News, because we're all about the family. We're all about the nuclear family, keeping the family together, and the appreciation of family and what it means. And so throughout my journey in this career path, I have really recognized an overall attack on that sort of thing, and I think this is part of that separation of parent and child. They want to create a wedge between the parent and the child because it's easier then to manipulate vulnerable children and teens. You know, if they can make them angry at their parents, then the future is theirs. And I think there's been a shift, too, within the library system as a whole. Across the country, you know, it seems that they've started to encourage the sexualization of children over the past few years. And I would say this has only happened maybe 5 years almost, I would say. Kind of started happening around 2020, which is the year this book was published. And it got to Baldwin County in 2021. I found that out yesterday. But I really do believe it's part of this whole, you know, international attempt to put these images and thoughts into the minds of our children.
Yeah.
And it just makes it so despicable that we're allowing it to happen. And it's time for people to stand up and fight for the future. And the way we do that is we protect our children. We make sure that they do not become victims of social engineering, as we're seeing in many ways, not only in libraries, but also in schools and universities. And parents need to be looking out for what's going on and reporting these books. Not only make sure your kid doesn't pick them up in the library, but look for them yourself. Because the more people that go in and look for these things and weed them out, the better off we'll be if we can just get them off the shelves when it's that bad, or relocate it into the adult section just so it's not readily available to children.
Yeah.
Yesterday when I was in the Spanish Fort Library, there was a toddler that was running around. His mom was there with him, but he had an older brother, but still also a baby type. And they were just running around the library. And as I was picking up this book, I had this book in my hand, and I was standing in front of the shelf where I got it from. And he looks up at me and taps the book, and he said, "What's this?"
Oh, wow.
And so I had to make up something, you know. I told him, "Oh, it's a book about dogs." And he was just the cutest little boy. But looking at his face after I had been looking at that, it really ripped me. I mean, it ripped my heart in pieces. I just had the worst feeling after that all day yesterday.
Yeah.
Because it's that bad. And so that's why I think it's important, you know, that I continue to inform people, but also I want people to find things for themselves and do something about it.
Well, and so have you heard, by the way, since the article came out today, have y'all gotten any hotline tips on finding this same book in other libraries?
Actually, what I've gotten today is a lot of support in the form of emails. So at the end of every story, I have my email address just in case anyone wants to email me or send me a story idea. So they email me, and they have just been very supportive, and they're so thankful to know about this, but also outraged and just shocked.
Yeah.
Because it really is that bad.
Yeah, it really is. But the fact that you did this, wrote the story, And I know y'all had to sort of cloud some of the imagery just because you didn't want to be promoting too much of what was in the pictures. But the fact that you put it out there the way you did, I think that's exactly what has to happen between that and like us talking about it with you right now and everything else. That's got to happen. But we've also, like you said, we've got to have parents and grandparents and just informed citizens who are willing to walk into a library, check the shelves, and then ask the questions, why is that book over there on the shelf? That's what it takes to take it all back. Erica Thomas, thanks for your work. And in case we don't talk again soon, Merry Christmas, my friend.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
That's something else. That really is something else. And y'all, listen, if you didn't hear my monologue when I opened the show today, I did my monologue today on what it means to keep the left from trying to steal our kids. That's what they're doing. The left wants your kids. I mean, you don't see anything on the conservative side that is trying to corrupt minds like this. But there's like this passion on the left to corrupt the minds of kids. Why? Because they know if they can get them while they're young, they can have them for later. And whereas, in the schools, when you have these activist teachers, they're putting gay pride flags on their classroom. It's got nothing to do with reading, writing, and arithmetic. And this book doesn't either. This book has no value other than to sexualize children. And it's in a section right now that is designed for 13 to 17-year-olds. 13 years old. 13 to 17-year-olds. Go check it out at 1819news.com. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We'll take some text messages when I get back. Y'all stay tuned.
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right.
And we are back. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Covering down on some major ground across the northern half of the most beautiful state in the nation. This one I am talking about Alabama, y'all. Alabama. I mean, this show goes like way down south of Birmingham and up north of Huntsville and Tuscaloosa, back to Gadsden, parts of Georgia, Tennessee, and even Mississippi, all thrown in just for good measure. Hey, by the way, I'm about to go to the phones. Before I do that, I got to remind you guys, the latest Right Philosophy podcast came out yesterday. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. It's up on our YouTube channel. It's also up on rightsidemedia.org. Listen, we have a whole lineup. So there's 4 separate video podcasts that come from Right Side Media, plus the Right Side Radio Show, plus the written op-eds that get published every week, and then tons of social media content and everything's going on. I'm pretty stoked. But Right Side Media is growing, and as we do, we just want you guys to know the content is out there for you. So yeah, the latest Right Philosophy podcast. I filmed that one from my house, and it comes out every Wednesday. And yesterday it came out. Go check it out. Let me go to the phones real quick. Kevin from Athens. Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing better than I deserve.
Well,
Good to talk to you, Phil. I really appreciate you. Appreciate your radio program.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. What's on your mind today?
Well, just what you're talking about with the libraries.
It's a
I'm glad
mess.
It took this long. I'm glad it took this long to get to Alabama. I'm sad that it finally got here, but I'm from Ohio, and it started there in our library, our local. I mean, if you looked up Goshen on the map, you'd be hard pressed to find it. But it was in our library. It started with a magazine called The Advocate, and it was a gay rights magazine, and their theme was recruit, recruit, recruit.
Yeah.
Now, who do you think they were trying to recruit?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, we tried, the citizens in Goshen tried to get it out of the library. Like I said, this was in the mid-'90s, and to no avail. Yeah, it was in the section where kids could get it. That was their intent.
Well, I'm sure it was. I mean, we had a real problem here in Alabama with gay pride parades or displays in the libraries. Drag queen story hours, and these books. I mean, you're right. They're absolutely. The agenda is recruit while they're young. That way you can get them when they're older.
Yeah, but I mean, here in Alabama, it's a relatively recent occurrence, and I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's sad. It's really sad.
It is.
But that's, all we can do is just protest and hold our public officials' feet to the fire. And if that mayor don't want to stand up, then he needs to be out of office. Whatever it takes to get him out of office.
Yeah, that was one of the lamest responses I've ever seen from someone in public office than the one he sent in about that. He didn't even address the book. He just said, "We will stand for the First Amendment." That's not nothing to do with the First Amendment. Hey, Kevin, thanks for the call, man. And listen, I'm glad you're here and not in Ohio. So thanks.
I'm glad I'm here too.
All right.
More power to you, Phil.
All right, take care, man. So I'm gonna get some of your text messages, and I'll come back around to a few other stories. I want you to know, though, you might think, okay, who are the people that want this in the library? Well, there are people who literally will advocate for this. In fact, another story that came off of 1819 is only 3.5 weeks old, and it's a group that we keep hearing about. They call themselves Read Freely Alabama. What a neat name, Read Freely Alabama. Well, Amber Fry is the lady who runs Read Freely Alabama, and they protest every time you try to remove a sexually explicit book from public libraries. And I'd love to know what Amber Fry from Read Freely, Alabama thinks about the book we've been talking about today. But the reality is, yes, there are people out there who are almost in a like a deranged sense wanting to pursue getting these. In fact, they would want more. And they'll try to tell you that, well, if you're going to move that book, it's like a book banning. You're a book burner. You're like Hitler trying to burn books. No, we're not. In fact, here's the deal. If you want this book in your house, go buy it. Go buy it, and you know, I would say, like Erica did, it may be child abuse, and you may open yourself up to something if you do this. But nonetheless, if you really want the book, it's not banned because it's still available. But our taxpayer dollars should not be putting smut in children's hands. That's all there is to it. There's zero credibility behind anyone who looks at that book and says, well, I think every child needs a copy of this.
And the truth is, in today's age, the amount of people who have troubles with addiction and their lifestyle because they were introduced to stuff like this at such a young age,
Yes.
when they, like, unintentionally, they stumbled upon it, and it's just, it baffles me that we're pushing for, not we, but people are pushing for having this in front of kids' faces when they're not trying to find it, and it just, that affects them for the whole life. Like, it could start issues that they didn't ask for, and it was forced upon them. So it's just, it's we have to protect what our kids are seeing.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And the truth be told, well, I'll tell you what, let me back up. There's also somebody, now that you said that, you made a great point. There's a lady we've had on this show at least twice named Malia Stevens out of Birmingham. She's a counselor, and she's amazing. And I don't know how she does her job every day, because to me, this is the kind of stuff that if I were a counselor or if I were an investigator in a pedophile, crime ring or something like that, I would take the work home with me at night. It would keep me awake. But Malia, her mission in life is to counsel kids who have been subjected to porn at early stages of their life, and they are addicted to it. They're impacted by it. And you're right. It has a devastating effect. It alters the brain. It actually alters the brain chemistry. And this has got to stop. Let me get a few text messages. Marvin from Addison says, hey, Phil, remind people tonight is the Hartselle Christmas Parade. I think you just did. Hartselle Christmas Parade, that's tonight. John from Huntsville says, Phil, this has been a very informative show. Keep up the good work. John, man, we appreciate you, as always. Thank you so much. Sam from Priceville, he says, I don't believe our library has any of these books, and I walk through it regularly. Good. I'm glad, man. And listen, Priceville, if you don't have them, good on you. But keep your eyes open there, citizens. Sam, thanks for the text. Lewis from Birmingham says, heinous is almost impossible to say as a Southern lawyer and not sound like the prosecutor from My Cousin Vinny. You know what, though? That prosecutor from My Cousin Vinny, I've seen him in courthouses everywhere I've gone. Yeah. Well, Your Honor, what we have here, and everybody knows it, Judge, is what we have here is, bless his heart.
A lot of judges, too. Don't see it talk like that.
Brian from Decatur checks in. He says, is it the sexualization or the attempted sexualization of minors some sort of pedophilia? If not, then what is it exactly? And why is somebody not in jail? They're going to hide under the First Amendment. They're going to claim that by putting it out there, they didn't put it in the kid's hands personally. And they're also going to claim that it's okay because the content is accepted. And listen, the reality is it's not acceptable. It's only acceptable if culture allows it to be acceptable. Steve from Huntsville says, my niece got her butter bars. That's a second lieutenant at Alabama A&M, and we are so proud. Her first salute was from a retired first sergeant, and she will be on active duty in our United States Army. After the ceremony, she said, go Army, beat Navy, and I told her to trust good NCOs because they know who the E4s are. Listen, Steve, congratulations to her. Tell her thank you for her service, and thank you for being a part of a family that raises up heroes. So that's the good stuff. That's great. Stephen from Athens, he says the suspect UHC shooters, I don't know what we're saying here. What's he saying? Oh, United Healthcare.
Yeah.
The suspect shooter's goose is cooked. Okay. Okay. All right. Patrick from Grove Oak says, Lee, talking about the Butters and Lee segment we did, Lee is exactly right about the drones. Well, and she may be. And I had a whole section on drones I was going to do today, but I can already tell there's no way I can get to it. So I'm saving that for tomorrow, which is just as well because drones have been a story today, and there'll be more content for tomorrow, I'm sure. And then Lee from Huntsville texted in. She was on the show. How'd she do that? Lee from Huntsville texted in saying, our local Huntsville Madison County Library moved the book in question. Oh, really? To the adult section. It's vile, she said. Yeah, no doubt. Well, at least they moved it. Yay, but wow. Bruce from Springville says, there's a possibility these drones are being flown from vessels operating inside international waters. That's being talked about. In fact, that's one of the storylines. Is one congressman says he knows that it is coming from an Iranian vessel. How does he know that? I mean,
he said it. I don't know how. The problem is so many people, different parts of government are saying different things. Like congressmen are saying it's an Iranian mothership. Somebody like John Kirby, who I don't take anything he says seriously anymore, but he said these are just normal civilian aircraft. That's just simply not true. I've seen the videos of it. And then you got other people saying that there's no evidence of it being a foreign actor, and that's all we know. It's like, so then you know nothing, right? It's just
when you say there's no evidence that it is, there's also no evidence that it's not.
There's no evidence that they don't know anything is what they're saying.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's obviously I'm not in the government, but just from what I've seen and what I've heard, I feel like it's a foreign actor poking at a vulnerability and trying to poke the bear maybe before Joe Biden leaves office. I don't know, but I'm not an alien guy, so I'm not going to go down that route, but I think it's a foreign actor is my opinion.
You're not an alien guy.
Nah.
Okay.
I'm not an alien, guys. I'm from Earth.
Yeah. So, the reality that some of these are being cited as being big as a car or an SUV, this does not look like somebody who's got a hobby.
No.
So launching it from their garage, and I look at that and I think if it was a hobbyist of some kind, flying their UA. First of all, why are they always flying them at night? And then secondly, don't you think by now, with the amount of outrage and concern and fear that is being generated, that the person would have come forward and said, hey, I'm sorry, it was just me in my garage. I built this thing for a science experiment.
Well, why is the government not telling people? Like, then again, they may not know, which is almost worse. But it's just like, if you've got people freaking out, why aren't you tell them what it is? Because the secrecy of like not knowing what it is makes it worse. So
yeah. Okay, I feel a whole section coming on this tomorrow.
Yeah.
Robert from Madison says, somebody shoots down one of these drones and we'll get an answer real dadgum quick if it's one of theirs, if it's ours or theirs. Here's the thing, though, Robert. Shoot them down with what? I mean, are you going to get a deer hunting rifle out there and scope in on it and take a shot? Because you may be shooting at a police helicopter that's doing a drug roundup for all we know. And so somebody fires a shot at one of these, they're running the risk that they're shooting something that's either A, manned, or B, legal at the very least. And then you shoot a laser at it, you can also cause severe damage to someone who is piloting that craft. So that's a dicey circumstance. And by the way, I'm told that there's only, I think, 4 or 5 agencies within the entire governmental infrastructure that have the authority to shoot down drones. And so more to come on that. We'll figure it out. Robert from Athens says, Dear Colonel Phil, second text of the day. Okay, he did have a text earlier. But he says, if the Democrats had their way and everyone bought an electric car, we would need 1.25 trillion watts of new electricity to charge them. Solar panels and windmills cannot provide that. The Green New Deal is a raw deal. Robert from Athens. Perfect. What else have I got here? Man, you guys are some texting machines. Adam from Athens says, hey, JP, go Vols.
Thanks, I guess.
He says playoff bound and number 1 in men's basketball.
I don't think they'll be number 1 for long. We'll see.
JP.
I got to be honest. They'll beat Ohio State, though, in football. I'll tell you that.
Brent from Pell City says it's easy to keep the teachers quiet when they can lose their retirement health care if they speak up. Well, no, they won't lose it if they speak up. And there's a whistleblower status they're allowed to have. Jeff from Indiana says, OMG, John Kirby just said the drones everybody's reporting are not drones at all. They're just regular aircraft. He said, wonder what they're covering up now. Yeah, that does make you wonder. 3 more texts, and then I'll take the break. John from Harvest says he said it's never used to be a violation of the First Amendment to keep children under 18 out of the seedy back rooms you were embarrassed to be seen going into. Yeah, no kidding, man. And back then, even the people that did that stuff knew the improprieties of getting kids involved. And then Rough Leanne from Huntsville says, Lee saved me a trip to the Huntsville Library. Well, check it out yourself anyway, Rough Leanne. And lastly, Sandy from Elkmont says, hey, Phil, Don't you call a drone the size of an SUV a helicopter? Is she telling me not to, or is she saying, don't you call it that?
I think she's saying, don't you call it that. That's a good point.
Okay. Sorry. All right. We're taking a break. We'll come right back. It is Thursday, headed into Friday. We are almost done with the day. You guys stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. Man, making common sense like a superpower. Hey, let me go to the phones. We're running out of time. Jeffro from Indiana. Hey, brother, how you doing?
I'm going through Nashville, same place I was yesterday, so who knows?
Well, you know what, though? There's been a
Imagine
couple
that.
of times when you've called me and you were still waiting on a trailer. So I think I'll take you going through Nashville right now as opposed to still sitting down in Faulkville.
Oh, yeah, that's much better. But kind of deja vu even yesterday. Kind of flipped me out. I was talking to JP about, I said something about you being clairvoyant. I said something about Kreskin. And I said, you don't even know who Kreskin is, do you? No. Well, Kreskin died last night.
Did he? What?
Kreskin died last night at 89, yes.
Did he really?
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about him in years,
It's
and
Jeff's
everything
fault.
that just come out. I killed Kreskin.
Yeah, Jeff killed
I'm sorry.
Kreskin.
Well, now, wait. Wasn't Kreskin the character played by Johnny Carson?
No, that was Karnak.
Oh, that was
Kreskin
Karnak the Magnificent.
You remember the guy,
That's right. Yes.
read people's minds and everything, Kreskin?
Yes.
Yeah,
I
well,
do.
he passed away last night, yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's something. What do you think about this library stuff, man? Do you hear that segment?
Oh, yeah. I was wanting to speak on the drones, though.
Oh, well, by all means, go right ahead. Drone on.
Okay. He's talking about following these drones and everything. They shut their lights off and everything, and they can't track them. These municipalities up there on the East Coast and everything, they got flare system on their police helicopters and stuff. All they got to do is spot one and things putting out a heat signature because it's got to be warm, with the electric motors or whatever kind of engines it has, battery. Follow one. I mean, it's going to run out of juice before you probably run out of fuel on a chopper.
I would
See where it
agree,
goes.
and not only that, but night vision, and I mean, there's so many ways that they're gonna track this down, and I guarantee, but they better release what they find. That's the thing.
It's got something to do with us, I'm afraid.
It's something to do what?
They're keeping it too hush-hush. It's got something to do with our government because they're keeping it too hush-hush. They would be flipping out if it was somebody else.
You know what though? If you're gonna do if you're gonna do some type of a government test of a new capability, you don't do it over people's houses and then do it constantly over people's houses and to the point that they're generating film about it. That's not where you do the testing. That's just weird. So I don't know, man. I look at the whole thing. I think it's somebody better pony up an answer pretty soon. But this is the same Biden administration that had the whole Chinese spy balloon thing where they didn't know what was going on and then finally shot it down with an F-35.
Yeah, well, maybe Xi Jinping is getting his last digs in before Biden gets put out and getting his money's worth.
Something. All I know is they don't know what it is. That's wrong. And if they do know what it is, they won't tell us. Well, that's also wrong. So it's going to have to be the local authorities probably at this point taking effort. Hey, brother, the music's about to play. You be safe in Nashville and all the way to the house, all right?
Have a good one, Phil.
See you, man. John from Huntsville got the grades in real quick. He says, Phil and JP both get A+ for their equally awesome performances, even though JP needed to play some more sound effects. He said, but it means today's co-winners are Butters and Lee with an A++ for a nearly perfect performance. Congratulations. By the way, JP, I hope you do get your sports segment tomorrow because I got a couple of sports questions for you.
Fire them at me tomorrow.
Fire them at you. All right, you guys, listen, I say it all the time, but it's true. There are, in fact, more of us than there are them. And oh, by the way, God is still on his throne. So stay in the fight. We'll see you tomorrow.